Okay, so now that we have a good basic understanding of designing and drawing in Cabinet Vision, let's take a look at the reports that are available to us once the job is drawn. So we have the plan, elevation, and 3D view, which we're getting familiar with. If we go to the Reports tab, let's take a look at some of the options we have available to us. We've talked about order entry back in the designing section, so I'm going to skip over that. I'm also going to skip over Bid Center because that's kind of a separate topic that we'll talk about later. First, go into Report Center. Report Center is where what I think of when I think of like PDF reports or paper reports. So for example, it could be a door list. Here's the style, here's the sizes, here's what cabinet they're on. It could also be a drawer list. This many boxes at this size. Plus you can also do like parts specific list. I have my drawers set to buy out apparently because they're not showing. If we go to face frame, I don't think much is going to show because we have mostly, our vanity cabinet is a face frame, but the whole kitchen is frameless, so we don't see a whole lot on the list. But you get an idea of some of the details that we can get here. So when you think about sending information out to the shop, obviously you want to send them like the layout of the kitchen or the job that you're drawing, but you also need to get some information as far as, okay, what size are the frame parts? What size is the finished in? What sizes are the nailers? And that type of information. Now, if you have a CNC, the parts kind of speak for themselves, especially when you put labels on them, which we'll talk about later. But you still have a certain need for some of these reports. So, like I said, there's a lot of different options here, and Cabinet Vision comes with several of them by default, several different types of reports. But we can actually take it so much farther. Just like with anything in Cabinet Vision, the stock version, it's decent, it's pretty good. But you can actually customize it, you can make it exactly what you want to see. And we're going to cover just a little bit of that in this course as well. So that's the first type of option we have, is this report center, like PDF reports that we can send out to the shop. Then we have plan and elevation sheets. We're going to talk a little bit more about these whenever we get to actually creating customer drawings. But basically, if I just send this to drawing, this is more of an automated way of creating a elevation view. You can just create the whole thing and send it to PDF rather than pulling it out page by page. And like I said, we'll cover that when we get into creating the customer drawing. Assembly sheet, this is kind of it seems like some shops love them and some shops think it's a waste of paper. An assembly sheet is essentially, if I send this to drawing, not sure whether it's portrait or landscape. Okay, so an assembly sheet is going to give me a list of the parts. It gives me a little graphic of the cabinet, and you can actually customize this layout so every cabinet has a page, and then the shop knows exactly what goes into that cabinet is the idea. Back to the report center, we have part sheets. I actually have not seen this used a ton because I can't imagine the amount of paper this would require, but I guess you could save it to a PDF. But this essentially prints out a page for each part. So if I send this to drawing, go to the last page, you can see some of the parts here. And you see it's creating a page for every single part. So most times that does not get utilized, but that's our different types of reports. Now let's dig in just a little bit deeper into how I like to structure the report center, because that's mostly what I'm going to be talking about in this section. So from the reports tab, we're going to go into report center. And the very first thing we need to do is get rid of these awful report groups. Nobody wants to be switching between different toggles and waiting for them to load. What I like to do is clean up all of these different groups and create our own. So let me give you an example of that. I'm going to back up to the reports tab. We go directly into report center. We go to set up reports. And we can see our different groups on the left. I'm going to just add my own. And what I like to do is, like, for my main function, I like to call it cut list, but you might have your own terminology. Sometimes if you just have one group, I might give it the name of my shop, whatever. And I like to put an underscore first so it goes to the very top. And this is what I like to do with my primary thing. Just whenever I go to cut list a shop or send it out to the shop, this is the group that I want at the top. So I'm just going to call it cut list for my example. And you see that goes to the top. And because I really like a clean list, I'm actually going to delete these groups. This is not deleting any of the reports. We still have all the reports. It actually reminds you of this. Deleting a report group will not remove any reports. And we like this a whole lot better. So now the goal of groups is just to kind of compile the groups that we like for a certain function. So you could also create like an ordering group and kind of put some nice reports for a guy who's having to order materials. And so you can kind of separate it in the different functions there. So that's what report groups are, and you can organize that however you please, but I would definitely put your cut list group, like think of like your door list, your drawer list, anything that you need to send out. Now that we've cleaned up our report groups, let's go back to the main report tab and come back into Report Center. And oh no, we have an empty category. We have 2 empty categories. Where did our reports go? Let's take a look at that. So in this Report Center view, I'm going to go to Setup Reports. And this is the entire list of stock reports that Cabinet Vision offers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort by title by just clicking on it. And I'm going to click it again so it starts with A. And we'll just kind of look through these briefly. There are a lot of them, but most of them are just duplicates with slightly different sorting. So there's actually not as many as it initially seems, but let's just look at a couple options here. So applied door and panelized end. This is like a door list, but only for finished ends. Like a regular door won't show up on this list. Then we have a banding cut list, which I haven't seen many people use. It's actually, I don't even think I have banding applied to this construction is why that's not showing up. Then we have a board stock cut list. This can be nice if there's also face frame specific reports, but this can be nice if you have like a floating shelf or things that use solid wood that aren't really a face frame part. Can be a useful addition. In fact, maybe I want this in my cut list. So when I find one I like, I highlight it and then I just go check the box. And now let's go look what that did. I'm gonna go all the way back to the plan view. Let's go to reports. So from the plan view, I'm gonna go to report, report center. And now because we put an underscore in cut list, it's the very first group and it just loads right to this group. And now I have one report to pick from. This is wonderful. Now let's go to setup reports and let's keep looking. I'm gonna assume that I'm outsourcing my doors, so I don't really care about panel and style and rail cut list, but I would like a door list. Not a cut list, I don't want to see the part, so let's just keep looking. Okay, so let's keep looking for more reports. I'm going to go to Setup Reports, and same as before, just hit Title to sort, and Title to sort from A to Z from the top. And you can see this is in green because we have it in one of our groups. So we know where we're at, and we can just keep working our way down. So we have cabinet labels, which is interesting because, you know, if you have like Avery stickers, or even if you have like a Dymo or a Zebra that's a single page printer, you can really set up some nice labels here. Cabinet list. This seems like a decent one. Got each room separated and then a list of cabinets with the sizes. So we'll say we like that one. Let's add it to our cut list. And then let's keep going. I don't really care about countertop. I don't really care about the door parts, but I do want a door list. So again, you can see there's a lot of different door lists, but they all look practically the same. There might be tiny sorting differences, or some of them will show the square footage and little differences like that. And I didn't explain earlier, but you see how I'm going up to report mode and going between setup and view. That's how I'm previewing it without adding it to the group. So without putting too much thought, I'm just going to add this first door list. You can obviously look through them and see which one you like. And like I said, we don't care about panel and style and rail. We just want the overall size of the door. We will need a drawer list as well. And I like this combo one, this drawer and rollout list. It puts them together all in one. So we'll add that to our cut list. And then we got a face frame cut list. That'll probably be a good one. I'll add it as well. Not going to be using laminate. Material summary is nice. I'm going to put that in the ordering. Now this one, there is a few differences. So you can get one that works with kits. You can get one that's grouped together. I should probably show these while I'm explaining it. The first one is just everything all together. No categories. The one with groups puts it in the right categories, which I like this one, the grouped one. And then the other thing is group with kits. There we go. And so what kits are is you can basically kit materials together. So say you have drawer guides and you also want to add the locking devices and the back brackets or whatever. If you make a kit, you will need to use the material summary with kits. So for this one, I just liked the grouped one. I'll add that to my cut list. Arguably, I could maybe just put this in the ordering tab instead of the cut list. Molding report, I like that one. We'll also put that in the ordering tab. I'm going to put that in both actually because the shop might need to know that as well. Panel stock cut list, I'm going to assume that we have a CNC and the parts are going to speak for themselves. No reason to send out a 10-page sheet with a list of parts if the parts are already cutting. Rollout cut list, we could do that. Looks like that's pretty much all I want for now. So let's go back and see how we did. In my cut list, now I have an easy way to toggle between the reports that I like. And for the ordering guy, he can go right to his group and get his information of like how many hinges, approximately how many sheets. And you will see that this is not the same as Screen to Machine Center. Supposedly, if you use the optimized version of the material summary, it's the same as Screen to Machine would optimize, but it seems to still have some discrepancies. The one I'm using that doesn't say optimized, it just goes by the waste percentage back in the material catalog. So you might want to be cautious of how much you rely on this sheet amount. So there we go. That is how we set up our report groups and how we add reports to those groups. At this point, I do want to mention that these are simply the stock reports. So some of you might be thinking, wow, this is a lot of nice reports. And others might be thinking, well, I don't really like the way this looks, or, well, I really would like if it also had this or this on it. And so I want to take this little video to just quickly introduce you to the idea of customizing reports. I want to also give you more information later in the course to help you start customizing yourself. But in this video, I want to focus on just showing you a little bit of what's possible, very briefly. So let's take this face frame cut list, for example. Let's say you don't want to call it face frame cut list. Maybe you just want to say frame report. So there's two ways of editing. There's a way to edit the properties or the data that's coming into the report, and there's the visual report designer. So what I just described was a visual change. So I'm going to click on design report, and you actually can't edit a system report, so it's going to make a copy for me. So I'm just going to put my name at the end of it. And now it takes me into the editor. And so again, without getting too deep, I just want to show you just a couple things. So don't worry if I'm just flying around. I just want to show you a couple things. So right now it's using this parameter, which is back at the report level, but it's literally, it's literally a visual editor. So I could say frame report. And I could take it a step farther and say, I want to make that bigger. Cool. Now let's say 3/4 solid cherry really should be bowed and a little bit bigger as well. Okay, so now description is first and quantity is second, which is not really something I would do, but I want to show you just a little bit of the visual editor. So I can't change the type of data that comes into this, but what the point of the visual editor is I can start arranging the data that I do have. A lot of possibilities here. I can make some really nice reports. So just know that if you don't like the visual style of it, something can be done. Okay, so let's save that. And now let's go to report properties. Now here's where the complex part comes in. The report designer sure is a little bit of a learning curve, just to know where to go and how to make things look right visually. But the back end of the report designer is much harder. So basically it uses SQL to pull in tables of parts. And SQL is a programming language that helps grab things from CabinetVision's database and order it how you need. So here you can see we're selecting all the different columns from these tables and linking them together, putting a couple filters on it with the where statement, and then we're ordering it by name, part, and then width, and then length. So later on in the course, I do want to give you an introduction to this so you can start making some basic changes to this. But I did want to show you this because I think it's very important that you know that you're not stuck with the stock report. You can build just about whatever you want in here. So that's all for this little teaser. You can look forward to a more advanced look later. We're going to talk about getting the plan views and elevation views to a PDF file for the customer to see. So there's two ways to do it. This video is going to talk about using the plan and elevation sheet button from within the report center. My preferred method is to go use the to drawing button and pull your drawings out onto the drawings tab. I'm going to cover that in much more detail in the customer drawing section. But in this video, I do want to show you how this is more of an automated click a button and it generates all of your walls and all of your plan views. So let's look at how this works. So I want to get just an elevation view of wall 2. So I should see something like this. I'm gonna go to reports, plan and elevation sheet, just the elevation. I can do both if I want, but I'm just gonna do elevation for right now. Wall 2, and go to Drawing. Now where did that go? Well, this is our first time going to the Drawings tab, so let's go there. And you can see that we have our drawing. Now it actually created 2 sheets, I'm not sure why, but we're gonna ignore that for now. So this is what the elevation looks like, and it changed it to black and white, and it looks a bit differently than how we created it here. So the very first thing I wanna talk about is, how do we customize this? Well, we've already talked a bit here and there about layers, and I'm gonna go here briefly, just again, real quick, up in by my shop layers, I'm gonna go to edit, and there is an entire section specifically for wall elevation. So you can turn on and off certain parts, like internal parts are not showing, drawer boxes are not showing. You see the little printer icon is a little bit dimmer than the others. And then you can go to advanced, and you can make it always show in black, and you can add some hatching. And then there's a lot more settings that are hidden. Again, when you first click in here, it feels like there's not much, but this is where you can control what dimensions are available. You can change, do I want to show the opening heights, the frame sizes? Do I want to put a line for the shelves? See that dotted line? So there's all kinds of setting. And for now, I'm not going to cover the layers part just yet. The customer drawings, like I said, we're going to go into much more detail. But for now, what I want to cover is what makes it use this template here. Like we have this little table, Smith job, room 1, date, and then we have our drawing. So whenever we click this, what made it look like that? And you can actually see there's a template here called wall elevations. And if we hit change, there's nothing else to choose from. So I'm going to go to the Drawings tab, go to Drawings Library, hit the drop down and go to wall elevation, and I'm going to make a copy called wall elevations, and I'll just put CE at the end so I know it's Cabinet Explorer, and I'm going to click edit. Now, this is a very similar editor to what we're going to see in the assembly sheets as well. So I'm just going to quickly make a couple changes and just talk about a few things that you can do. Now, when I am working in this Drawings tab template setting, I do like to have the grid on because it helps me align, and I'll change my grid pretty frequently. Like when I'm working down here, if I'm trying to line up text, I'll go to properties, I might put it on 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch, whatever I need to better snap and align my text. I'm kind of a stickler for having text aligned. So the one thing that we can't change is we need the container in this drawing. That's what makes the elevation come in. We can move it around and make it show in different places, but we do need to have this in our drawing. Obviously we can resize it and do whatever we need to. Now remember, it had this little table with each cabinet in here. If I want to look at what this table has in it, I can just double click on it. It has all cabinets, and you can see it's using description, comment. What's visible is number, unit name, width, height, and depth, and the scribe. Here's the columns that are still available. Now, I don't really care to see this for mine. Now, if I wanted to clean it up, I could get rid of the scribe and, just go down to 4 columns, keep it a little cleaner. But for me, I just want a simple elevation template. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of clean this up just a little bit. I'm gonna add my own text. I'm just gonna say Cabinet Explorer, like that's the name of my shop, and date over here. Maybe make it a little smaller. Sometimes I'll put it on decimals while I'm editing. So let's do 0.1. And then let's just get rid of some of these lines. We can add them back in later. Now I do kind of want the room name. Let me just kind of pull this aside later. I don't want job description, but I do want job name. So we'll put that there in the middle. And I'm gonna actually separate this into, I'm gonna put wall name right below this. And I'm just quickly making a couple changes, just so you, again, my main goal with this is to show you the functionality that's available, and then you can dive deeper as you need to. So with this aligned to the right, now I got room number 1, and then it'll say kitchen, and then it'll say wall number 4, or whatever elevation it's on. So how do you know what you're allowed to put in the curly brackets right there? Because obviously I can't just get text and say room name, because then it would just say room name. So how do I know what's available to me with what I call the auto text or dynamic text? It's pretty easy actually. Cabinet Vision made this part nice. If I get a text box and pull it out and click the 3 dots, here's all the fields that are available to me. And depending on whether you're in assembly sheets or elevation view or plan view, whatever, this will be slightly different for you. So you can add the wall name, you can add wall face and wall, that's pretty much the same thing. You can go to room and you can start looking at the settings. So let's say, for example, you wanted to put the construction method on here. That generates the text, and now that would pull in that CE frameless or whatever we named our construction method. And you can do the same thing with material schedules, doors, all kinds of stuff. Now, for the sake of this example, I just want to generate just a nice, clean looking drawing. So I'm just going to keep it very basic with job name and room name. And again, the goal of this is so you can kind of see what's available to you. Okay, there we go. Let's see how that looks. So I'll save this. Let's go back to the reports tab, go to plan and elevation, and let's look at wall 2 again. But before I send it, I'm going to change the template. Now I have wall elevations CE, and we'll go to drawing. And we'll skip to the last page. And now you can see I have just a much simpler, I don't have that huge table there. And like I said, if you want to go detailed and you want to put construction, materials, doors, you can certainly make a little table for that, and you just make your header a little, or your footer, whatever you want to call it, make that a little bigger, and you can really do a lot of neat stuff with this. Put your logo, all kinds of fancy stuff. And I'm not even going to go into the floor plan view because it's exactly the same. You edit the template, you send it the same way, you just check the box if you want to send it. To drawing. Very similar idea. If you don't like this template, then you just change it. Okay, now, like I said, I myself prefer utilizing sending to live drawing and then arranging my drawings on the drawings tab rather than this automated create everything at once. There's pros and cons to both, and we'll talk about that more in the next section. But this gives you an idea of how that works and how you can set up templates to make it better fit your brand and look a little more modern. Now we're ready to talk about assembly sheets. Now, some people just totally ignore this because they feel like it's either a waste of paper or it's just too many sheets for the shop guys to look at. Because with the way you can do screens in the shop, you technically don't have to waste paper. But again, you want to make it as simple as possible for the shop to understand. But you also want to avoid them making trips back to the office because they don't understand some of the details that you had on your drawings. So pros and cons to both. I personally like assembly sheets. Even if the guys aren't regularly looking at them, I would still create them, put them in a folder somewhere they can see them. That way, instead of coming back to the office, they can just look at the assembly sheets and see all the materials and all the parts that are inside of that cabinet. Assembly sheets are essentially a really in-depth, everything on this page is about this cabinet. And so you can just really get a lot of information on it compared to just a typical elevation. Because that's one thing that you'll find in Cabinet Vision is you can put all this detail into the cabinet itself and have everything perfectly right. But getting that information communicated to the shop is kind of another whole task in itself. So I believe assembly sheets are one way that we can kind of counter the effects and help the shop stay informed. So how do we create them? First of all, we go to reports, assembly sheet, and I'm just going to choose one cabinet. I'm going to do cabinet number 1. And very similar to the last video with the plan and elevation sheet, we have a template. So we're going to get into that, but for now I'm just going to send number 1, standard base, to drawing. I go to my drawings tab. And here is our assembly sheet. So essentially, you know what? I'm actually going to go back and send this in landscape because it looks a little squashed. So let's go to reports, assembly sheet, to drawing in landscape. Go to the last page. Okay, that looks a little more normal. And let's put it in fractions. Okay, so an assembly sheet most times will include a table with like doors, door fronts, and the different parts inside of it. And it will also include kind of the section view with openings. That's pretty common. And then you can put all this other information that can be helpful. Cabinet number, the name, the overall size, and then you can just throw in some random stuff such as reveals or scribe or what type of end, and then the job information. So it's a good way to just put a lot of details right in the cabinet level. Now, let's look at editing the template, and I'm not necessarily going to build one totally out. Again, my goal is to show you enough so you can see what's possible. So let's go to Drawings Library and hit the drop down for assembly sheet, and let's just copy this one. And then rename it, put a CE on the end again, and we'll edit this. Okay, so the very first thing that I would highly recommend is on this container object, let's right click and go to edit. And you can actually do more than one view. So right now we just have one checkbox on the primary face. What if I also want to show the end view or the top view? My personal favorite is showing the primary face along with the end view like this. So the very first thing we need to do is with the graphic or the container highlighted, change it from one graphic to 2 graphics. This gives us opportunity to show 2 different things, primary face and the end view. And I like the end view, like I said, because you can see adjustable shelves, rollouts, or whatever's inside the cabinet. Now, one thing you have to watch is if you leave it on 0%, you'll only see just a blank panel. You'll basically see the right end or the left end, whichever one it is. You won't see into the cabinet. So what I like to do is put like 3 or 4%. That way it gets past the end and you can see the sectioning. Now there's some limitations, like if you're doing combined cabinets, like, and you have like 3 or 4 sections wide, like a big inset, 96-inch long island cabinet, the end view is not going to be super helpful because it's only going to see the first section that it's in. For most simple cabinets, I like the end view. I know some people like to do the top on a shaped cabinet, just another, you can do separate ones. And I've also seen quite a few people do just a simple 3D view. So there's a lot of different options here, and I might go into more detail as far as what all is possible with some of these additional graphics. But for now, I'm going to put it on primary face and end view. And now let's look at the table. How do we control what shows up in the table? Again, very similar to the table we saw on the elevation sheet. We just double click, and I find that it works best to double click kind of by the outline of that table, just somewhere around the edge. And then here's the different groups that we have available. So we have doors and drawer fronts. One that I like to pull in is I like to have the drawer boxes on here as well. Hit add and pull that in, and then I can move it up, and we'll get quantity, width, height, depth, and material, sure. And then along with that, I'm going to do rollouts. And I'm just going to make a couple changes that I see pretty commonly when I'm helping other people set these up. Everybody has different preferences and things, but I'm just going to do kind of a common setup. Frame parts, we'll leave that on there. Even if you're doing frameless, it doesn't hurt to leave it, because if it doesn't find any frame parts, it'll hide it. One thing that I would maybe do is maybe do board stock along with frame, because if you happen to, like I said, floating shelves or something that you randomly use a piece of hardware that it's not a face frame, it might not show up here. So you can play with whether you want to use board stock or panel stock, or possibly both. Board stock or frame, sorry. You can play with whether you want to use frame or board stock, or maybe both. Okay, now we have hardware, comment, and notes. And I'm going to get rid of notes. I'm going to leave comment because we can leave a comment on cabinets and I would want to see it here. That's easy enough. Let's look at some of the other sections we might have. You can do banding, you can do drawer guides, you can do hinges and hinge plates, you can do leg levelers, pools. And so we have several different options here. And each of these groups, like I said, when you highlight them, you can change what columns are available, which I'm going to just kind of leave those as default. And there's our updated table. And it's a little bit weird to edit, like, you see how this kind of defaulted to center? It's a little bit weird to kind of get this lined up. And like I said, I like to have stuff lined up. But what I like to do is turn the frame on. Actually, I need to do that in data. The frame is the outline. I want to turn the grid on. My mistake. Okay, so this helps me just kind of see what's happening. And it does a decent job of like snapping to the line above it. So it doesn't take long to get it lined up. And what I would recommend is just kind of play with this and get it close, and then just go send a sample one and then come back in and adjust, because it's a little bit hard to see like if you have enough room. And you can see that this drawer box section that is added, for whatever reason, is centered by default. So you pretty much got to go click on each one of these and go to left. So again, there's just some quirky things with the editor. Like for example, rollouts, that grid is not showing. So the first time I would do a rollout, that table row would be centered because I can't see it here. So if you're going to have rollouts here, I would go add a rollout in your in your plan. That way when you come in here, something is populating, because I like when everything is aligned the same. Same with cabinet comment. We don't want that centered in the middle of nowhere. And I can delete this, and I can make some adjustments to the layout as far as how I like to see it. Pull this down, and I could just add a text, and I could say cab number, and then I can use the little smart text to grab the number. I can put that up there all nice and big. And again, here's where I would turn my grid on. Helps me align things. And if you go to properties, maybe make this 1/8, just so I have a few more bubbles to click on. And then maybe I want to put the size right below this. So let's do dimensions and just go cabinet. And just look through these filters, because you'll be amazed you'll really get some good ideas as you're just looking through this. So we'll do cabinet width with an X, and then height, and another X, and then we'll do depth. So you can see you're just kind of totally in control of this. And we obviously don't want that one to be that big, so let's downsize this one. And you can even, you could put your logo on it. I don't like this, this is way too busy in my opinion. Like I would get rid of the style and the scribe. I would clean this up, maybe put left and right in together, and the toe height and the toe recess together. Like I said, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time, because it's really, It's not difficult, especially once you kind of see some of the things that I'm doing. Like, they're not difficult to do. It's just you need some inspiration to know like what's possible. I think it would be kind of cool just to have a bunch of templates that you could pick from, you know, just totally different templates as starting points. It's also nice that, you know, you just have the freedom to do whatever you need to. So you can see we could kind of lay out this in a column view, or just, you know, maybe you want to do a sidebar all the way down the left side. You can do portrait or landscape depending on what you're working with, but just play with that text function. Go see what all options you have in here. Yeah, you can make some really nice information, and just start with something simple. And if the shop's like, hey, you know, it'd be nice if I knew what the scribe was so I knew where to dado the frame, or hey, it'd be nice if I knew what the toe kick height was because when it's changed, I don't have a good way to see it. And you can just find ways to incorporate those little bits of data here. That way the shop has an easy way to look it up. So let's save this ugly little template, and let's go generate a new assembly sheet. So I'll change it to my new one. I left my grid on. Normally I don't leave the grid on the table. I just turned it on when I'm editing. I didn't mean to do that, but that's okay. So let's go to standard base and send to drawing, and then go to the last sheet. And here you can see my in view. Looks like I should have used a little bit bigger number than 3 because I can't quite see the elevations. Which one is cabinet 1? My numbers are hidden here, so I'm gonna go to layers and go to annotations and show object numbers. Okay, so cabinet number 1 is this guy. I'd like to be able to see that drawer. So it looks like 3 was just a little bit too little. So let's go back into our template and click on our drawings and go edit. And let's put this at like 5. And maybe I actually didn't change it. Maybe it was still 0, I'm not sure, but 5 should be fine anyways. So you can see how you can just kind of play with your template and then just go create another assembly sheet, go to the last page, and then you can see it. Now, if I was doing this, I wouldn't necessarily want to see this in brown. I would probably like to see it in black. And quick note on the layers part of things. If I go into my layers, there's a whole section for assembly sheet, but this is only talking about the primary face up here. So like some things I would probably do here is, you know, I wouldn't really need to show the hardware. That would be fine. I might turn on the architectural hinges, and that way I don't have to show the hinges. And, you know, you can kind of play with what you want to show on this top view. But this assembly sheet section is not controlling this. So if you want to control the color of this or what's visible here, this is actually, remember we chose end view? It's literally replicating whatever your end view looks like here. So to illustrate that, let's make doors red and toe parts dark blue. Okay, so there we can see our red doors. Toe parts didn't really change. Let me see if I can do another example. Let's just make the hardware green. Okay, that's a good example. Now, let's go send another report. Assembly sheet, to drawing, and go to drawings tab, and go to the last page. So you can see how it's literally controlling whatever. If you use the end view or the top view, let me actually just go into my template and show you what I'm talking about there. Remember in my graphic, I picked end view. This front, top, end, and 3D will literally follow whatever you have selected when you're inside the cabinet. So if you want to be able to change it, you have to also change it inside of the cabinet through your normal layers. The assembly sheet section is only controlling the face part of the assembly sheet. So have fun setting up your template and playing with a few designs. And if you look on the forum, the Cabinet Vision forum, you might even find some inspiration there. I've seen some pretty clean and nice looking assembly sheets with the different shops I've seen.